What's up, guys? This is Harry from the Working Holiday series. The next chat that I have is with Hayden from the Real Australian Dream. It's one of the better stories and one that I haven't been able to stop telling my friends and family about. So I'm really excited to get this one out. Hayden is someone that was about 200 kilograms overweight. His relationship was in tatters. He was working a job that he probably wasn't all that happy in. And ultimately, he had just broken his leg and was confined to a wheelchair for about 6 months as a 26-year-old kid. Fast forward to where he is today, and he's been traveling around the country for about 2 years with his partner, Amber, and newborn baby daughter, Freya. It's one of the nicest stories I've had the pleasure of listening to, as I said. He's dropped about 80 kilograms. He's happier than he's ever been. And to cap it all off, his travels are now leading him to go from campfire to campfire, beach to beach, caravan park to caravan park, performing, singing songs, playing his guitar, which he hasn't touched for 10 years, and now raising money for sick kids. Again, it's a really lovely story, one where I barely had to say a word. Hayden has the gift of the gab, and when you do hopefully check him out, you'll hear that he's got the voice to match as well. He's a mix of sort of storyteller, classic, true blue Aussie bloke, but someone that actually has this real optimistic, positive philosophy and outlook on life. I think these are the sorts of stories that I'm just so looking forward to finding, promoting, because it really should inspire a lot of us to seize and make the most of each and every day. The quote that this sort of reminds me of, this chat, is yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So without further ado, I really hope that you enjoy this chat with Hayden from the Real Australian Dream. Check out the show notes after or during as well, so that you can find where he's at and follow him along his journey. So I did, as I said to you, as we were just walking into coffee, a little bit of sleuthing.
Yep.
I did a little bit of stalking. Just checking around,
what have you found?
Seeing what Hayden has been up to. So I wanted to go a little bit obliquely into the story, if possible. Yep. In that, I want to know just first off the bat, not too much detail. So how long have you been on the road for now?
So in January, January the 7th, January the 20th or thereabouts, that'll mark 2 years on the road full time since we had a normal life. So through that 2 year period, the way we lived, changes dramatically from where we started, as travellers to where we are now. But in short, 2 year period, coming this January.
This is probably the longest. You're probably the longest guest I've had. So the guest that's been on the road the longest as well. Like, to me, I'm like, I'd love to do 3-6 months. Long would be great, but then to have 2 years down the line. So what you've been doing, my quick summary would be you and your partner sort of packed up things, went off on a journey with a little camper trailer to begin with.
Yeah, so it starts from, I guess, not sad beginnings, but almost semi-sad. So on the Gold Coast, we live in East Coast, which many people listening or watching are probably familiar with the blonde hair Australian girls and the white sandy beaches and the party atmosphere and life. But for us, we had everything working in the property space, real estate and money, earning really good money. Money wasn't an issue. We had boats, we had jet skis, we had the monopoly lifestyle, so to speak, that you think you want and you dream of, and yet me and my partner we'd separated so far that we decided to separate completely in terms of end the relationship, and so travel was our last hope, and so we had literally the house packed down. All of my stuff was in one room, all of her stuff was in one room. Removalist was coming, I remember, on the 7th of January. To pick up our stuff and drop it off in 2 different locations. So that was the end of a 7-year relationship. And I rolled over one because we were still sort of amicable. I rolled over one night and I said, why don't we go on a little 4-6 week holiday just to see if we can work it out. We've been together 7 years. We can't just let it flop now. It's too much. You invest too much money not money. I mean, too much time and love and all that sort of stuff into a relationship of that length, and to let it go, I was like, oh man, just it's a real shame sort of thing. And so she'd travelled all through Europe, America, and she was an extensive traveller when she was young and done the top decks and the Kentuckys all around the world and backpacked. And whereas me, I'd dedicated, my adult life to work, so I'd never done anything. I'd been in front of the keyboard on the phone just trying to make a buck because I thought that, the more money I had, the more entitled I was to a certain level of happiness, as we all we all find ourselves in certain parts of our life, thinking that that's the solution, that we just need to invest 100% of our time into that. And the more money I got, the further we drifted apart, and the lonelier I got. And here I was at 25 years of age. My mates were all envious. I had, as I said, the big boat, the jet skis, the house, no debt, and just sitting at Christmas alone. It's like, how am I bloody here? This is rubbish. Like, where are all my friends? Sort of thing. But not only did I sacrifice my relationship with my partner, but my family, my friends, because I was so involved in work that nothing really else mattered, because I thought I'd get that time down the track later when I'm balling, sort of thing. And so we left on a 4-week trip, bought some camping gear, second hand off Gumtree. We box trailer, queen mattress in the back of it, and just tarps, and just left for a 4-week holiday. And mate, that our lives changed pretty much within a couple of weeks of that.
Do you remember the sort of gravity or the moment, maybe it was the time that you said, let's go camping. Did you remember at some point in time there was like a real decision that had to get made about, the future trajectory of your life? Was that time, or was there another sort of...
Well, I remember when I rolled over originally, and I don't know, I say this to Amber all the time. I say, I do not have any, because I hadn't had any idea of even asking that. I had no, forward thinking of traveling. It just came out of my mouth. And it was such a weird moment, because as soon as it came out, I went, oh shit, because I knew that if I didn't commit, I've just said it, if I didn't commit to it, it was definitely over, because that's what our life was. It was a bunch of empty promises. By me, I'll be home by then, I'll be, we'll go do that. And it was always just, oh, sorry, hun, I got caught up, or, whatever. And so I knew that would be the last empty promise I'd make, because I knew that would definitely be done then if I so I remember thinking, oh, damn it, I'm going to have to travel. If I really want this relationship, I'm going to have to bloody travel. And the idea of traveling, I was just like, this is going to be hell. I had no interest in it, eh? Oh, mate. I remember thinking this is going to be torture.
So you weren't a camping background sort of
a
dude?
little bits and pieces, but I'd evolved. I'd camped and fished as a kid with my old man and that, but I'd evolved so far, and he we can touch on later, but he passed away unexpectedly when I was younger. But I'd evolved so far from that in terms of the corporate world that not really had we done anything of significant, camping or outdoorsy stuff in, apart from boating and jet skiing and all that, because it just wasn't a priority, and so, but I remember that moment of just being like, yep, okay, our lives about to change, because within 7 days later of that rolling over and saying that, the removalists came, we put all that stuff in a container, and we were gone, and that was it.
So just prior to this as well, the year that's following, so this is just your head down, you're full on as this is real estate agent at this point.
Yep.
So you headstrong into this, you've got all the things that you want, and is this sort of how the name of what sort of travels now on your chest came about?
Well, the year leading up to this, I guess there was a heap of things going on in my life that at the time, I guess, hindsight enables me to look at how important they were in retrospect. But at the time, I'd broken this leg, the knee, the ankle, severely in a boat accident, which rendered me pretty well useless. So prior to that, I used to weigh 200 kilos. So I was 199.7 kilos. So a huge, absolutely huge man. Like, I'm obviously still a bit tubby now, but I was, the biggest loser type stuff. Couldn't tie your shoelaces, gut, 7XL sort of stuff. Everything to solve unhappiness in my mind back then was to replace the void or the gap with some sort of object or thing that could be bought with a monetary value. And so at 200 kilos, feeling unhappy, feeling like I'm not living my life because I'm a little bit hamstrung by my weight, naturally I thought, instead of going on a diet or buying a gym membership, I'll go buy a big boat.
Nice. Yeah, that will solve.
And that'll
all
solve
the
everything. Subject to a test run, right? And so we go to the Brisbane boat show. Me and a couple of mates, we say, yep, we're going to buy this boat and it's $100 grand or whatever. And we go out and we say, yep, we'll take that, but take us for a test run first and we'll just make sure that we like it. Anyway, we're out there and I hit the deck or the boat, the floor of the boat, and I remember looking down and my leg was, not where in the line that it should be.
So you've just hopped over onto the boat?
No, we're out in the ocean and there's a few waves or whatever, and I've hit the deck and I've looked down at my leg and it's I can see that it's buggered. And the pain obviously, and when you're in the middle of the ocean you don't have a solid floor, so every wave, every moment, and I can feel my leg crunching around. So if you don't like squirmish squirmish things, probably turn off now. But so that was one of the real low point. But I remember there having the moment of clarity in my mind, and I still remember it clear as day. My leg floating around, 200 kilo bloke sitting on the deck of this boat, just in agony, thinking, all right, this is going to be the foundation for something to move forward with, because everyone else here is all right. Mind you, some, a few sore backs or whatever, but I've got a broken leg. Next time I'm on the floor or in my way to an ambulance, I'm probably either going to be on the way to the morgue or I'm going to be, having a heart attack. So I remember having that moment of like, this is a good thing then and there.
Wow.
And what led was a traumatic time, because at 200 kilos, you are significantly obstructed from even recovery. So I couldn't use crutches. So I was confined to a mobility scooter for probably the best part of 6 months. So that was like full, like almost palliative care type care that I needed from my partner and my mum. And so I couldn't use crutches, couldn't use anything. So I was just going from having boats, having jet skis, living the life, to being completely strict, bed-ridden or chair-ridden. And it was some real low points, man. Because I was so big, I couldn't support my weight, which meant I couldn't sit on a normal toilet. I couldn't use crutches. So I had the shower outside, the mobility scooter. I'd be able to swap off to a chair, shower under the garden hose, and then I'd have to bring a machine, like not a machine, but a stool thing, where they use it in old age homes. That's like a tall toilet that the bucket is your toilet bowl.
Yeah.
And so without going into too much depth, that's what I had to use, for the toilet. And then because I was so big, I couldn't even wipe my own bum in that. So my missus, my mum had to do all that sort of stuff. So I was a 25-year-old bloke who had everything, and now I'm getting my ass wiped.
That's
absolutely
huge
humiliating.
Juxtaposition there. That's a shift.
Absolutely humiliating. And to the point where I'm sitting at home, everyone's at work. And again, I'm restricted completely. So I'd spend 8 hours a day just, with the TV remote in my hand, like this is the definition of hell. What would happen, mate, if I had to go to the toilet and no one was home? You don't
live in Barry.
Yeah, so that was a real, real dark period, and you just question everything. You have all that time, all those hours, and you just think, what am I doing, man?
What is? I mean, you're saying there's obviously the low points, but I'm kind of impressed in a way that the moment that leg breaks and you're on the boat and you're in agony and all that sort of stuff, the quick shift, I guess, that you made at least, which was, this is going to be a platform for me stepping up in the world and doing something with this.
Yep.
That's a really great mind shift to make. Is that something that you've always had? Where do you think that?
I've always said things are always happening for you, not to you. And so regardless of whatever stuff that's going on with your life, and I've always had this through no matter what's happened, is that things are always happening for me opposed to me. So as an example, I look at, my dad, I was raised by my single dad, lived with him the majority of my life, and he passed away of a brain aneurysm, dropped dead when I was just turned 18. And so he dropped dead, hit the floor. And I remember thinking then, this is shithouse, this is best mate, this is rubbish. So this is going on, 10 years ago. And I remember thinking then and there, like, all right, mate, this is good. I always have the ability, and I think everyone should try and embrace a certain level of this, is to try and think of whatever trauma or whatever it is, what is it going to set you up for in the future? And that right then and there, that death of him, immediately, I was smoking a lot of, pot and just, 18-year-old drinking, going to uni 2 days a week when I should be going 4, and just taking life as a bit of a whatever, you're just young and you're just a little bit of a rat bag or whatever. And that happened. And I remember thinking, all right, life's not a game now, mate. Get going. So pull the socks up and start and transition your life into something a little bit better. So that then and there, that lesson I took was like, all right, tomorrow is not guaranteed, sort of thing. And I sort of mixed up my messaging a bit because I thought, all right, my old man's dead. I've really got to go hard to make money now. I can't, so I sort of mixed up my messaging from the lesson I learnt from that. But, in perspective and hindsight, again, now moving forward, I realised that it played a big part in what I'm doing now because I've been there and realised that I could quite easily drop down on this couch now as he did, like you can.
Yeah.
And, for me, it's like, okay, did I really milk the most of the 28 years that I had on the earth? 2 years ago, I would have said no. I spent most of it behind a keyboard and a mouse.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I'd be, obviously wouldn't be happy to go, but I'd be like, I'm a lot happier than to go now than I would be 2 years ago, So having that ability to look at things in the perspective of what they, even in a negative, what are the positives, and that I knew that was the hardest thing I'd probably face in my life apart from losing a child. So I knew that whatever the world threw at me, from that point on, I was going to eat it up and spit it out and just move on. Yeah, and I've been through worse, so get on with it, sort of thing.
Honestly, I think the things happen for me, not to me, is a very easy little mantra to live by. And one that came up that's relevant, a friend of mine just reposted a story. He's not a social media user, like never really jumps on it. Although he's actually doing his own lap around with his partner, actually. Right. Who I'll be speaking with later, Blake, shout out. But he shared a little story, which was, he was a guy and his mate were going down to play a bit of golf.
Yep.
And unfortunately, his friend's wife had recently passed away.
Yep.
And he was speaking to his mate whose wife had passed away and was like, oh, later tonight, the missus wants me to make the chili, but I just don't know if I can bother to go down to the shops, whatever. And then they keep playing, and then a little while later, the guy goes, make the chili. And at some point in time, the guy thinking about this realised they obviously weren't talking about, golf or what's going on. It was the fact that in any moment, things can change, people can be gone. And so when you have an opportunity to do something nice for someone you love or care about, that's not an opportunity lost.
No, that's right.
So definitely take it and make the chili.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, definitely right. And I guess that leads us on to the next stage of our sort of journey. Are we done after the the camp? We left for a 6-week little trip, and everything. After that initial, I used to spend, I don't know, maybe out of a 24-hour day, somewhere along the lines of maybe 15 to 16 hours on some sort of phone or computer, so a fair chunk of it on a device. Yeah, that's right. And so after that initial feeling of
if you need to tighten this as well, we can grab that with where is it? Oh yeah.
Yeah, sweet. After feeling a little bit, trying to, get over that little bit of feeling lost, you lose your sort of identity, I guess. When you throw it all away, you go from, a young fellow who's accomplished so much and, in this industry and a name that I guess people sometimes, would speak about in those sort of circles to being a bloke living on a riverbank in a box trailer. It's quite a contrasting, position. But so once I was sort of able to sort of get rid of the brain fog, I guess, of what I'd call it, like the fear of not being busy, the fear to be able to just sit and be comfortable in your own silence and in your own mind. It's really, even that in itself is a unique thing to have to go through, because you find you often have other people's thoughts, opinions and whatnot in your own mind, or you're worrying about, different moving parts of your job or your life or your rent or whatever it is, to be able to completely clear yourself all but of a few, worries. And you sort of sit there and you're like, the bloody hell am I doing? Then you have really time to analyze your life, and you look back and I think, man, the person I was 2 years ago, I just hate. At the time, you don't think about it, you evolve that much. You're like, I can't believe that was me. You can. If I saw myself in a street now, myself 2 years ago, I'd grab myself by the neck and give myself 10 uppercuts, because you just can't stand the idea. Can't stand the idea of me being that person, because it just doesn't doesn't sit well with me for who I am, who I am now and who I've always been.
But you do have to, at the same time, sort of thank that person
Correct.
for the now view that you have. Because
That's
it
right.
only means so much as a result of the guy that you would have uppercut
That's
10
right.
times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I guess that's what's led us to this latest sort of journey. And so after our 4 to 6 week holiday, plan, we were just sitting there and thinking like, I'm really sort of enjoying this. And here, me and Amber we'd had everything. We had, we'd go nice dinners. We'd have, whatever within reason, but whatever we wanted for a young couple, which was all we thought we'd ever dreamed of. And unhappy as all hell. And then here we are on a riverbank. I remember northern New South Wales. This was in the floods of what year are we in? 2020. So not last year, the year before. So the first round of floods, and we got isolated for 5 days, just us on this little mound, like island thing, and it was just complete serenity. We're in our box trailer. We'd run out of water, so we had tarps that were collecting rainwater. We had like rations, baked beans and tuna and all that sort of stuff. And we just never been happier. And we're like, mate, we are bottom of the barrel right now in terms of where we've been in our lives. Like in terms of eating and accommodation and you just couldn't wipe the smiles off our face. We're here playing Yahtzee, we're here playing cards and, we're having a few beers and we're like, this is the best, and here we are, we couldn't find happiness with, jet skis and boats and pools and tennis courts. And it's like, mate, all we needed was a can of tuna and bloody, that's right. And so that was a real catalyst in terms of where we were going. And then shortly after that, Amber started to sort of say, I'm not feeling too well. And I'm like, oh, this is when COVID. Oh, you'll probably get blacklisted for even using that word, but that's when the pandemic.
We'll just bleep it,
yeah, that's right. Bleep it. Yeah, there goes your traction.
Yeah.
That was when the pandemic was at its height, and so I'm just like, oh, geez, we've got COVID and whatever, and anyway, she a couple of days goes on, and she's getting sicker and nauseous and all that, and then she does a pregnancy test, and the 2 lines come up, not the COVID lines, but the pregnancy lines. And so for me, that was the utter, complete shock / fear / what the, beep am I
Did you go down the wormhole that sort of like sucked into a vortex of just, whoa.
Yeah, I just like, this is the worst possible thing to happen. Because remember, 2 weeks ago we were breaking up.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, Jesus, this is just another broken family here. Like, this is just great. Like, so I was just like, I was smoking cigarettes. I went through about 4 packets in about 10 minutes, just one after the other. Just thought, mate, how have
This is you're on the road, still like camped out at
We're
the
in
moment?
a camper trailer out in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is, and Amber, like I was up front, everyone knows this. I was just like, this is really bad. Because we were literally still trying to work on our relationship, so we're like, this is ultimately like, this is so not good. And the best part, or the worst part, best part now, worst part then at the time, was that we tried for 5 years to have a baby with no luck. That was one of the other reasons, the stress and everything. So we tried, year after year, day after day, to have a baby with no luck, and that's when when we were supposedly ready for a baby with a job and the financial backing and all the things you meant to have a kid. And we were ready then, Here we were without jobs in a camper trailer, having a baby, and I'm just like, this is like, life hates me, eh? Like, this is like terrible timing.
This is before the life's happening for me?
Yeah. I just remember in that moment, I was like, oh man, like this poor kid, like broken family, because that's what I had growing up. Like, it was amicable, but at the same time, ideally, anyone listening, like, you love your mum and your dad in most cases so much, you just want to spend as much time with them as you can, and to go through like 50-50 splits or weekends and all that sort of stuff. It's just like the idea of me anyway, like just the idea of hell to be part of, to have that.
Repeat.
And so that's what was going through my mind, straight away. I'm just like, this is, no idea. But after that initial shock, and I remember that period lasted probably about, because we didn't find out we were pregnant until Amber was about 9 weeks.
Okay.
So that's the 12 weeks is when, you get the thumbs up, it's all good to go. And so we only had a 3-week period between finding out to you're all good. So it was quite a delayed.
Did you tell anyone during that time, or you sort of just
parents? That was pretty much it. And so we kept that downhill. We kept it under wraps till well late in the pregnancy. But I remember that 12-week scan going in there, and I saw the little jelly bean for the first time, and everything changed. I was like, all right, you little bugger, you got me. You got me. And after even just seeing that little jelly bean on the screen, I was like, you've got me. Life's real good right now. Because you just it's ridiculous, but I fell in love with this little bloody black and white image, in the belly, and I was like, all right, this is great. From that moment on, I was like, sweet. And by that point, our relationship had improved dramatically, and life was going a lot well, and we'd upgraded our setup. We went from the little box trailer to a little pop top sort of caravan sort of thing, and we're like, all right, we're pregnant now. We might as well just do the whole pregnancy on the road, which is what we did.
That's what I'm sort of impressed by that fact, because you plan for the trip, well, for the very short sort of test pilot trip in a way. And then you go, well, I think this is going really well for us.
Yep.
And then you get hit with the news of like, oh my God, how do we deal with the fact that we've now got a kid on the way? And then you've gotten to the 12-week mark where it's like, well, now it's all good. It's kind of like it should be fine. And now you're still going, but we've already given up the house, given up all, the standard job, the lifestyle, that stability that everyone's looking for. And you're like, nah, we'll stick on the road.
Oh, because I just knew that for me, that I knew that if we head back to that life, that normal life, it was going to be that standard broken family scenario, because I knew I hadn't developed enough yet to even, on our relationship, but I even as a, to be a father, I knew that I wasn't mature enough yet to go back to the real world and be a dad and balance all those things. I knew that straight away, and that's just my personality. I've got a very addictive personality. So that if I go into something, I've got to be the best at it. If I go into, it's like this, social media thing. As soon as I started it, it was just a wormhole of like, all right, this has got to be, it's got to be big. Same with my corporate space or whatever it is, music, which we'll touch on later. But it's just, it's got a really addictive personality. So whatever I go into, so I knew that if I went into, working again, it would have to be I'd have to be the best at it again, and get back into it, which requires time and energy and all that.
Was that a discussion you guys had together? It was like, so how are we going to deal with this? And was there should we go back to a house, or you're both sort of similar page?
It wasn't even a discussion really. It was like, we just knew that it wasn't even an option. Yeah, because we just knew that we hadn't gone and grown enough to be able to go back into the pressures of that life, and whatnot. So we went up to the tip of Queensland, Cape York, and again, for those listening in the background, we had zero travelling IQ, I guess, in terms of Australia, in terms of caravans, in terms of locations, in terms of what to do, what not to do, and we just kept on cracking up north, and we bought a caravan, and in the caravan space, for those listening, there's different types of models and I guess types of caravans, whether it be on-road, off-road, touring and all that. We had no idea about any of that sort of stuff. We just, typical bloke, just got on Facebook Marketplace, typed in caravan. It's literally the first one that came up. Said, yeah, that'll do. Went and picked it up and then just kept going, and... How
much was that?
I think it was... maybe just under 20 grand thereabouts.
Okay. Is it for a marketplace caravan, or I have no idea about caravans.
Yeah, it was just
bottom of the.
Yeah, it was it's not the bottom, but the caravans you buy now, brand new, are $110,000.
Yeah, home and wheels.
Yeah. Well, this was just just a roof upgrade, essentially a glorified camper trailer.
Because I know that you guys, it was sort of like a logistics thing of the pack up or the pack down or the setup or whatever was quite a long time for the trailer. It's how do we make that sort of thing easier? How much more efficient? Did you cut a lot of time?
Oh yeah. Well, our first spot with this camper trailer, mind you, not all camper trailers are like this, but our original setup was was such a setup because we were traveling a long period of time with a lot of gear. It was all packed on top of each other. So to get one thing, you'd have to get everything out. So we stayed in our first spot for a month because we dreaded the idea of pack down so much, because it was a 4 hour ordeal.
Yeah, okay.
And so when you're raining in New South Wales, the flooding and all that, like everything's wet, and it's like, oh, we can't leave anyway until it's dry. Because otherwise everything's just going to be shit, rubbish. So, so for us, it meant like we could not have went any further in what we had, because it just was unviable and unfeasible to set up every couple of days. And, you spend 4 hours up and down and you're like, mate, day's gone. I've got to leave tomorrow again.
Was that by accident that you did a pilot test run, or was that literally in the plan? And just while you go about that, I'm going to close the door because I'm hearing buses a lot.
No dramas. No, well, it was, we as I said, we only left for a 4 to 6 week holiday. So the idea originally was to not even really, didn't really matter too much because we were going for such a short period of time. So, it didn't really come into equation. Like, oh, well, we can put up with it for 4 or 6 weeks and it won't be too much of an issue, So there was no set pilot trip originally. As I said, we weren't going for a long period of time. So it was just a little holiday sort of thing, and we'll work it out as we go. And then, obviously we got that, and that was the cheapest, most affordable option for what we wanted to do to start off with. And yeah, that was just pretty much it.
So do you reckon it took about that 4 week period of time for, I guess, the white noise to settle down?
Longer. Yeah, longer. It took pretty much the whole first year to enable, because the whole time I'm playing in my mind like, what am I doing? I've got a baby coming, mate. Geez, you should be at work. You've got to be creating. If I don't create a financial healthy position for her, like she's never going to get ahead, and all this sort of stuff. And future kids, on my best years, I should be in there grinding, and got to be getting this going and all that sort of stuff. And I think as blokes and fathers, and this is not in any way mean to offend anyone, but I think we have a natural disposition where, as providers, I think we all fall into, or I certainly fall into the trap of taking on probably an unrealistic expectation of me to provide for myself, my family, my kids, mum, my brother, if need be. And that's just, I guess, the natural disposition I find myself in, is used to anyway, having to take it all on the shoulders and just try. If anyone ever needed anything, I needed to be able to have whatever I needed to help out.
Yeah.
So it took 12 months, and then long story short, we went out to the tip of Queensland, and we went through trials and adversity in terms of like just setups and pack ups and just learning as you do when you're traveling. When you've had no bloody idea, you realise, okay, that shouldn't have done that, or shouldn't have bought that, or whatever it is, small in the grand scheme of things of life, and we had Freya, our first daughter, in October of last year, so she's just over 1 now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And mate, life just changed. Before, I guess I'm missing a pretty crucial part of the story, but life before my corporate space, going through uni and even high school, I used to be a musician, playing in pubs and that, and mainly because I was always a bigger fella, so I could always sort of, when I was about 16, I looked 18, and so my old man.
So you were buying the beers.
Yeah, that's right. My old man was going through a bit of financial trouble, and I wanted to have a bit of money to be able to buy some stuff, and to go to schoolies and to do all this sort of stuff. And so I could play guitar and sing, and I could also, talk the arm off a chair, as you can probably tell. You've said hardly anything, no.
But ideal, mate. That's the way.
But so I went into the pubs in Townsville, which is North Queensland, and just sort of convinced them that I was 18 years old and that I was ready to do pub gigs. So I started doing me pub gigs, like playing nightclubs and playing bars and venues when I was 16 full time. So I'd do a Thursday, I'd do a Friday, I'd maybe do 2 on a Saturday and 1 on a Sunday. So I was doing 4 or 5.
How much could you rack in a week for that?
I was getting paid $350 a show. So $1,500 to $2,000 all cash as a young fella. That was where my addiction to money sort of first came into it. Because here I am making $2,000 a week playing the guitar, something that I loved anyway. And again, I was just just set up for 3 hours, play for 3 hours, and leave.
What stopped you? Because I mean, that's already quite for me. It sounds like a high level of success going straight into playing music gigs.
Yeah.
Age 16, pulling off $2,000 a week.
Yeah.
Which, like, if you continue that over the year, is a serious amount of money. So, like, what sort of was the shift, I guess, away from that? Why move on?
Because what I realised is that I have no interest in the technical ability or interest in the actual musical aspect of what I do. Like, I won't play guitar to try and nail a song down. Like, if I'm like, all right, I'm learning, I don't know, whoever, bloody Choir Boys or Fleetwood Mac song or whatever, I'm like, all right, that's 60% there. Yep, cool. I know it. I'll make it up. I'll work on it as we go, and I'll start playing it at shows. Like, I'll play it a couple of times, but I think that's kind of all right. Like, we'll get into it, because what I feed off is energy and entertaining. So what happened for me was that I was going to these pubs, and anyone who's been to a pub and live music and all that, 90% of the time you could have a jukebox on in the corner and no one would really know the difference, because everyone's there to connect and meet with their friends, and they're having a yarn, they're talking about the birds that they're chatting to, or they're talking about, whatever it is, their adventures or the places they've been, or the size of the palmy or whatever it is, and the music's just a small aspect of their evening, afternoon that just happens to be there at the time. So I fell in love with it because, it was more about the ability of the music and whatnot, opposed to the entertainment of sort of things. I'd rather have 10 people there singing the words and, shouting than 500 people there having their own conversations. I guess that's probably a little bit self-absorbed in a way, but it's just, what I feed off. And so if no one was, I remember I was sitting up there playing, and I just make fun with it. I just take the piss out of myself, because I'd be like, all right, I can literally see that no one is like fully immersed in this. Yeah. So I'd be like, singing Jimmy Barnes or whatever, and I'd be like, nubs and forks, palm trees in the corner, and no one would even know, Here I am, like, singing the Wiggles, Wiggles, lyrics into popular songs, and I'm like, yeah, no one is even aware what I'm doing right now.
Great set. Here's your $350.
Yeah, that's
really loved it.
And so it just became a real painstaking job for me. And I just was like, man, I hate this. I go to gigs and I just hated it. So I gave it up, mate. Packed the guitar away for 10 years. And
okay, so fast forward now. You've jumped in. You found that the baby's on the way.
Yep.
And I guess how long into the journey? I saw that you started doing social media fairly early on. Try and document the trip, and we can talk a bit about that as well. Because actually the first video I saw, it kind of reminded me of like a Australian getaway show.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like different like drone footage coming in inside, a bit of narration over the top, talking about like this really cool area. And I was like, that actually sounds like some sort of getaway show that I'm listening to. But how long into the trip did, I guess, the music start to make a revival? Yeah, so
because Amber plays guitar and sings a bit too. So I didn't even bring me guitar. She brought her guitar as a little bit of a to play around with. And I picked it up one day at a place in outback Queensland called Quilpie, which is an iconic outback Queensland town. So if you're on your travels and you want a outback experience, Quilpie is a cool little spot. But I pulled her guitar out, and I was like, I'm just going to play around with this or whatever. And I went to take a photo on Instagram of me playing the guitar, thinking, oh, that would be a cool piece of content. Because there was such you look back on my earlier posts, it's like, oh my God, like the saturation's up full bore, like it's just, you're just like, mate, if I post that now, what the hell is that stuff? Anyway.
But I love that as well. I love being able to look back and just see like how quick is the evolution of people. And you got to be embarrassed about your work. Like you have to, with like every week that passes by, you don't want to be looking back and like jacking yourself off about how good you are. You do want to be like, I could have done so much better.
Yeah, that's right. And so I went to, because social media, particularly Instagram, we spoke about it before off camera, but all my sales and marketing and all that sort of stuff in the corporate space, it was all very much corporate communication strategies and messages to ultimately produce a sale type based stuff. So it was a real real learning curve to integrate social media that had a personable connection, as an individual opposed to a corporate identity. And so anyway, I went to try and take a selfie or something with the guitar, and Instagram wasn't really a platform that I'd used too much. And somehow I ended up on a live, and it went 3, 2, 1, and I was like, you are live. I was like, holy shit, like what's this? And so anyway, I just was like, oh, well, we're here now. And I started playing a few tunes on Instagram Live. And And yeah, people were like, oh man, that's cool. Like, that's cool as. And I was like, yeah, cool. Thanks, dude. You know, like whatever. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll do it next week. Wednesday, 6 o'clock. And it just became a thing. And all of a sudden, like every Wednesday, 6 o'clock, I'd go live. And you know, before I knew it, it was a thing. And people were tuning in. They were there at their phones Wednesday, 6 o'clock, ready to listen. And,
that's pretty mad in and of itself.
yeah, and I was just like, this is cool, like, you know, whatever. But, you know, I was just having a bit of fun and I wouldn't practice or anything. I was just like, at this point, like, it's completely like re-entering. So I'm just trying to remember the songs I used to play back in the day. And, you know, it's all over the shop and it's just a little bit, you know, but I'm like, oh, well, guys, like, I'm, you know, and I'm up front with people. I'm not the best singer or anything like that by no means. But I'm just having fun. So, like, you know, if you want to go see, you know, someone good, probably not. Don't come to one of my shows. You know, like.
But if you want to see someone while looking at the stars in a cool outback setting,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you want to see someone who has a bit of fun and tells a few stories, then maybe. But and so after that, I'm like, oh, cool. You know, this is awesome. Playing a few tunes and just connecting with people and yada yada. And then, you know, I remember being up at Cohen, which is between, you know, Cooktown and the tip of Queensland, and I'm there, and some, you know, a couple of people at that town were like, oh man, it's, you know, it's real Australian. I'm like, oh, that's like real weird, like that's really cool, but like I can't believe people know me because I'm playing the guitar on, you know, on the Instagram. And it happened a couple of times. Like, oh, that's like, that made me feel good, you know.
Yeah.
And then we had Freya, and you know, it was like, all right, get back to work now, mate. You know, you got to get back to work. Started getting job interviews and all this sort of stuff, and planning our immersion into, you know, normal world. And she came out, mate, and I was just like, I can't do it. You know, like, I can't do it. I can't go back to work. I can't go back to the normal life, because I knew that I would sacrifice the relationship with her, because I knew that, you know, when you immerse yourself into the real world, you've got to think about rent, you've got to think about electricity, you've got to think about power and water and all those utilities and the cars and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And you have to pay that through a sacrifice of your time. That's just, you know, through a job. And so, yeah, it was quickly like, all right, well, we better keep going. I just wasn't ready to, because, you know, I worked it out. She had turned one the other day. And if I worked out that, you know, if I worked 6 days a week, I would have got 1 day a week with her full time. 8 of those hours I would have been sleeping. Worked out over a whole year, I roughly would have spent about 34 days in her first year of life if I was in the normal world doing what I was doing prior.
Yeah, damn.
And that, when I worked out, I was like, holy, you know, that's a month. And I look back at it now, I was like, okay, I've spent every waking moment, like she sleeps in our bed, like she's literally within that far of me most days of the week for 22 hours a day. I have spent the 10 years equivalent of time with her in this first year of life than I would have in the real world, you know?
That's actually insane.
Yeah, and so I'm like, mate, this is the best job in the world in terms of you cannot put a price on that. So if at some point, whether it be 4 or 5 years down the track, if I have to immerse myself back into that life, I know that I've spent I'm, you know, really giving it a hot crack, you know. And so that for us, when she came out, and she's like just in love, you know, she's the most beautiful thing. I just, you know, even talking about, I can't write Christmas, I'm a big softie, so I can't write Christmas cards or anything without being in tears, you know, because she just, you know, just everything. And then she came out happy and healthy, and I was just like, man, just blessed. And, you know, as a bloke, so, you know, when you have a kid, you're like, oh, give me a boy, give me a boy, give me a boy, you know, that sort of thing. But when she came out, you know, I was just like, oh, she's so beautiful, and like life's good. Just don't even care, you know, don't even care what sex it is. Like just make her good. And she came out happy and healthy, and then immediately I was like, man, like other kids doing it tough, other families, like it's just not fair. The world's not fair for people, good people, you know, like good people that go their whole lives and they, you know, do good things and never bad to anyone, yet they end up with a, you know, their poor little kid who's got, you know, leukemia or one of these illnesses, and you're just like, man, life's bullshit, you know, like it's just bullshit in the way that it works for some people.
So you had that thought just as you found
Freya just the way, you know, I guess just became a little bit more mellow and soft and just, you know, a little bit more emotional even. Just, you know, talking about it sometimes at a show can sort of bring me undone a little bit. But, you know, and the thought of these kids and I guess the reason why is because I'd wasted so much of my life working towards goals and objectives. Now, looking back, that I know were obsolete, useless, and added no real, value to me as a person. It was just what society, told me to do, through like owning houses and all that sort of stuff. We all fall into that trap, of course. But
the Australian dream.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. We'd realised we'd spent so long thinking money was the most precious commodity that we had, and materials, and when actual fact along our travels we realised that time is actually the most precious commodity that we have, and that tomorrow, a well overused cliche, but tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and that's so true, and for these kids and these families, like I'm lucky. I've got time at this point on my side. I've got an uncapped time. I could live to 75 or whatever. And Freya's happy and healthy, and Amber's happy and healthy. And we're so blessed that our clock, if we look at it like on a clock piece, is ticking at a normal rate. And then you look at these amazing little warriors, these children who have done nothing wrong but take their first breath with these illnesses. And you look at their clock and it's just moving at the speed of light, and you just think, mate, that's rubbish. And part of the reason, I remember thinking to Amber, I was like, man, I'm playing a bit of music. People are loving it. Like, I feel like I can do something here. I feel like I can, bring these shows into a format that if we can raise a few bob for a few families, then, I would just feel so complete about, giving back. Because I knew one thing for certain, I didn't want to play music and get paid for it, because it became a job then, and I knew I'd be back in the bars, back singing the Wiggles to the tune of Working Class Man, and I'd be like, God, I hate this guitar, I would love to chuck it on the bonfire.
So how long did it take for this seed to be planted? And we'll get to where it is now, basically, and sort of what's coming up for you. But this seed was planted of, you've somehow had a little bit of success with this music going live on Instagram, which, I mean, me having listened to you sing, I'm not that surprised about. It's actually pretty good. And then, you've had your daughter, she's happy, healthy, and then you're realizing that there are other kids that just aren't so fortunate. So I guess, how does that you develop to where you are now?
Well, the thing about me, it's as I said, I'm really addictive, and so it becomes like, you go from like an idea or concept to like you're balls deep into it like real quick. Sorry, you're all in. You're all in real quick. And so I remember saying to Amber, I was like, yeah, we're going to do a few shows, and she says, oh, look, yeah, cool, no worries. We got a brand new baby, so, we don't want to bite off more than, and she was like, yeah, of course not. We won't, I'm not stupid. We're not going to take on too much. Like, it's ridiculous. Anyway, good news, hun. We've booked in 50 shows. That's where it came from. So it went from like a real like.
And tell us the name of the show, and I guess what the purpose is of it as well.
So the concept, I said, we're doing 50 shows, 50 weeks to raise $50,000 for a charity called Make-A-Wish. And Make-A-Wish Australia, they do work for critically ill kids. They grant their wish or their dream, whether it be to go to Movie World on the Gold Coast, whether it be to meet their favourite football or netball player, whether it be to, dress up as Spider-Man for the day, whatever it is, and whatever their, dream or wish looks like, they fund and organise that kid who may be battling critical illness, maybe battling leukemia or a disease or illness similar, and for us, it's about maximising our times as our family, maximising it and getting the most out of our time. And these children, they're battling these illnesses, and just to have a smile on your face. That old saying, laughter is the best medicine, and you get so caught up, I can imagine you get so caught up when your child's facing that illness or as the child themselves, and you've got the machines and the tests, the hospital, and you're trying to work out the huge financial burden of accommodation and treatment, and as a parent now, you'd give your own life to be able to protect your child. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the time, what becomes the sacrifice in that whole process of dealing with that illness is is the enjoyment of life itself, because you're so focused on the treatment and the cure and all that you know that the life aspect of things
just gets sucked out.
Yeah, exactly. And so you know, Make-A-Wish, they give not only the child but the family an experience that just so special, you know, because you know, a wish and a dream and a smile form such an important part of treatment itself, you know, and just life itself. So for us, having a healthy daughter, we felt guilty. You know, a lot of people come to a show and they say, you know, what's wrong with, you know, why are you doing this? What's your story? And it's like, well, the story is different in the sense that we are one of the lucky ones. We are so blessed and feel guilty that there's these families just like us going through this such a shitstorm, you know. And so for us, it was, you know, we done the first couple of shows and we call it the Campfire Sessions Tour and the Real Australian Dream. The Real Australian Dream comes from, you know, me selling the Australian Dream for so many years, and I was on a mission to find out what the real Australian Dream was. And that's where the name came from. And we done the first couple of shows. We set out 50 shows, 50 weeks, 50 grand. And the first couple of shows, it was a matter of like, if you were lucky to be there, then great. I mean, in terms of like, there was no excitement, no hype. It was just like, oh, cool. There's like playing music in the caravan park, whatever. Go down and have a listen. And it's just snowballed into this thing now where 38 shows through, we've raised $42,000 for Make-A-Wish.
Epic.
And you know, you're getting 1,000 people at shows in these random locations. Like the other day, a bit north of here, you've got Jurien Bay. A bit north of that, you've got the little Sandy Cape recreational park, like campground thing. And we just pull out the generator, pull the speakers out, mate, bang, we're live on the beach. We're in these like random locations that people don't expect it. You advertise it, bang, there's 300 people there, and they listen to the live music like they'd never expected to be in these locations, you know. And so it's just really evolved and transformed. It's a show that, again, you know, it places no impotence on the importance of nailing the song completely. But
that's ideal, actually.
Yeah. But it's about, you know, I tell them this story that we've spoken to about how the bloody hell a real estate agent from the Gold Coast ended up in Perth, you know, playing music on a beach for God knows, you know, why, you know.
Which is very appropriate for a campfire session,
yeah,
right?
That's right.
It's a story, it's a magical song sort of time.
And you're just trying to inspire people to, just to spread positivity, you know, like I'm not religious, but I'm not religious. I sort of don't know what's going on in the world up there, you know, like I sort of just can't make up my mind what's right and what's wrong. I just feel like there's a certain amount of good energy and bad energy, and the more you put good energy and positivity out there, the more it reciprocates back to you and influences other people's life, you know. So it's all about whether we raise $100, you know, that's part of it, or $1,000, or sometimes we've raised $5,000 in a night. Regardless of the financial, you know, the amount that we're raising as well, which is obviously great and is our end goal. The other benefit is hopefully that through that 3-hour performance and that 3-hour show, that someone in that crowd goes away with that feeling of like, God, I'm lucky. God, I love life, and you know, how good is this? And put a few smiles on a few faces, and just provide people, I guess, another look or another perspective of the world, because naturally, you know, the world will always beat you up, no matter how good you are or rich you are or lucky you are. There's, at some point, you'll have to overcome adversity and you know, grow as a person to overcome whatever challenge or obstacle is in front of you. And naturally, sometimes we get down, no matter how lucky and fortunate we are. Like, you talk about being in the most blessed country in the world as Australia. And, you know, unfortunately, we still get down about, you know, even though we're so lucky, you know, but it's just naturally, you know, the way.
Human experience.
Yeah, exactly right. And so hopefully we can just provide a couple of hours where people can just let all their bloody inhibitions go, and they can just sit there, have a beer, enjoy, and know that they were part of something great, in the sense that as a result of that 3-hour, you know, time period where we all got together, we laughed, we sang, we smiled, that down the track at some point, there's an incredible team of volunteers and people behind the scenes at Make-A-Wish that are doing the work as a result of what we're doing here, that the end result is that there's a kid going to movie world tomorrow who's just had the best day of their life, whose family are, in tears because they've seen their kid, smile like he's never smiled before, or they've met their favourite, footy player. And that's, for us, it's sometimes you've got to take yourself out of, we play the shows, we get up there and you don't realise the impact you're having until you sit in somewhere like this. You're like, mate, there's like a kid somewhere today. There's, multiple kids, likelihood, that have had the best days as a result of what not only I've done, but the generosity of what people have done who have come to a show. And that, when you look at it in perspective, you're like, man,
it's crazy.
You could not pay me enough. Like, literally, if someone, old boss or whoever walked in here and said, here's a check for $500,000, here's your job back, I'd say, look, thank you very much, but I'm not interested, because you can't put a price on that feeling we get, like that, just that feeling of, just, man, someone's life is so much better today because of what we're doing.
It's your story for me is one of transformation. I mean, everyone's story has a version of it somewhere, and yours in particular, from the moment that the boat accident happened with the leg sort of moving forward, it does seem like a version of like your own healing process, your relationship to yourself and with your partner, and everything moving forward has been like this continual transformation towards, bigger and better things for yourself, and that's almost carried on into the community as well, and the fact that whatever you're going through in that positive vibe scenario, that sort of going out to the world is only but a good thing. And one of the questions I actually had for you at the beginning of this was your conception of community, because the way that you're integrating into different communities around all different parts of Australia, providing a shared experience, providing a place for good vibes, and then giving back to, one of the better causes I can possibly think of, which is helping sick kids, have a chance to smile and really enjoy a bit of life. So for you, does community, is there something that's really shifted for you in how you view community?
Mate, it's a one of the biggest things, and we didn't, like, when we started the Real Australian Dream, we had no idea that there was a community of travelling people. We were just starting a Instagram page, and originally it was a concept to do a podcast about housing, and I was just going to travel around the Real Australian Dream and travel around and look on a micro level of like individual locations and provide statistical data on them. Like, that's,
thank God you didn't do that.
They're like, all right, we're out. I'll unfollow this bastard. No, but mate, the one thing I got to say is that when you're in the I keep saying the real world, but you know what I mean. Back in normal life, you tend to get a lot of tall poppy syndrome and all that, where there's always someone, I guess, trying to bring you down because you're better than them, or because you're making more money than them, or you got a better house than them, or whatever. There seems to be a lot of jealousy, I guess, in that space in the normal life, no matter what you do. And I feel like the travelling community is really somewhere we've just felt so at home, because we feel like that everyone shares that same vision of just, living life and trying to inspire people to do the same thing. And our concept of community now, I guess, is completely different in the sense that, I guess we probably used to look at our community, our inner circle, or our immediate area. But for us now, our community, even through social media, is, we got 3 or 4% of our following, for whatever reason, are over in Brazil. Like, I have no idea how that's a thing, but there's a so that's part of, like, you meet people from all walks of life, people that you wouldn't normally associate with. All of a sudden you're speaking to a pediatrician who lived in Melbourne, and by no means would I ever come across him in our normal life, but for some reason we're having a beer over a campfire, along with a backpacker from Wales who's a huge soccer fan. And the three of us, you got a real estate agent, a pediatrician, and an 18-year-old backpacker from Wales, all having a beer and having a great time. But you know what I mean? It's just totally the people you meet, the stories that are told, and that's the biggest thing I love about it, is that you hear everyone's got a story, everyone's got a reason. Like, obviously this is my story, but there's just as many cool stories out there of redemption, of growth, of, like, I don't care what the world expects of me. This is me, this is what I'm going to do, So, for us, it's just been such a huge eye opener to connecting, and time flies when like I said to Amber the other day, if we had a wedding party of 10 people, tomorrow, like 5 or 6 of those people would be people I've met in the last 12 months, because time accelerates, so much quicker on the road. Like, you become best mates with someone over a period of days, opposed to being, years of, because you've got so much on a starting base in common from the start, And so, that's I think the relationships, and you like, we were at the cricket yesterday, and we got a bloke from Sydney, a bloke from Melbourne. Sorry, we got an army bloke from Brisbane. You've got a real estate agent from the Gold Coast. You've got a finance broker from Sydney. You've got a copper/firefighter from Melbourne. And and then you got another marketing bloke from country Victoria. 2 weeks ago we had like a dentist. You put all those people in a room. Normally it's like the most weirdest. Like, what do you want to talk about? I guess the weather's cool. But here we are, all such a diverse group. Doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, you're brindle, you're Hispanic, you're Asian, whatever it is. You bring those people into a setting like just in this community, and I think people, watching this who may be abroad or thinking about travelling to Australia, you really get to see that, that amazing part of the Australian culture even more so. The what they talk about in the good old days about, the shirt off your back and, having a beer with anyone. And, you get to really see that in Australia when you take yourself out of mainstream. You get to see what it would have been like 50, 40 years ago, where it was just everyone was your mate.
That's why I term this sort of backpacker mentality.
Yep.
It's everyone somehow kind of removes the shackles of their past life.
Correct.
And I think you've even read a quote of yours, or maybe it was taken from somewhere else, but your history is left behind, or it's left from yesterday.
Yeah,
or
that's
something.
right. Yeah.
And so I think that's half of the reason why that connection between people can just happen more authentically, more naturally, is because all of a sudden we kind of recognize the similarities where they exist, and you're not trying to be someone you're not.
Correct.
Even if it takes maybe a few weeks and getting used to the silence and having time to just be with yourself.
Yeah.
Like, why would I do anything but just be who I am at this point?
That's right. You're not going into a conversation with a preconceived idea of what they may think of you. Like, I'm going into a conversation at the Gold Coast as an example of my whole life. Okay, I'm a real estate agent there. I'm going into this conversation thinking that they all think I'm a greedy bastard. They all think, X, Y, Z. So I've got to immediately try and act so giving, so that they don't think I'm like that. You know what I mean? So whereas as we're doing now, it's just that this is who I am. You love it, you leave it, whatever. It's just as you said, authentic. You can be yourself, and the shackles, exactly right, are off. You have a fresh start. There's no matter what you did, year ago, 2 years ago, no matter the person you were, the things you may have done, they know you for what you are and what you present. Right, exactly right. We are now.
Well, I think the Australian dream has done and will continue to do incredibly well. I've actually just got the final sort of set of questions that I want to quickly fire at you and see what you can come up with.
Yep.
I think because your trip's been so long and it's gone through Queensland and through Northern Territory and then obviously through WA, and I imagine the plan is to wrap back around eventually at some point as well. We might even just put some of those locations in the show notes, or at least just link to where you guys are at. And maybe just before we move on as well, if for your campfire sessions that you were saying beforehand that you've got 50 shows, so you've got another 12 or so
Another
to go.
12 shows, yep.
So is that on the way down south and everyone can just find those shows, I imagine?
Yeah, so we just put them on our social media last night, released those, So the next show is on Boxing Day in Esperance, which we're super excited about. And then we've got 3 other shows in Esperance over that period between Christmas and New Year's. We're off to Bremer Bay, early Jan, Albany, Chains Beach, and then we ultimately move to South Australia for the final, couple of shows of the tour, and hopefully we'll break the $50,000 mark at some point along there. And
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, that's right. And the plan is, as I said, this was originally the $50,000 to do it, but we've you hear people's stories every day. You're just like, man, got to keep going because it's just the difference we're making. So hopefully in 23 and beyond, we can take it to all new heights and bigger and better and make more of a impact for those who need it.
You ready for the
quick fire?
The somewhat quick fire. Sometimes they go longer. We'll sort of see how they go. Over the past 2 years, I imagine little pickups, little investments have made significant difference.
Yep.
What is one of the best investments you found and it doesn't have to be super expensive.
Yep.
It can be, but one of the best investments that you think definitely shifted your trip into be like, oh, that's nice. That was a nice step up.
Yeah. Well, recently I think I got to say Starlink. Which is the Elon Musk thing. I mean, because in Western Australia particularly, I've noticed it, but you get a lot of rubbish days wind wise. You know, WA, I think they stands for windy always. You know, and so you can be like, it's beautifully amazing, but you know, 3 out of the 7 days you're probably going to be blown away. You know, it's only good for flying a kite, and so you know you're in these areas, and a lot of it's so remote. There's no phone reception or anything. You know, so you're literally sitting there twiddling your thumbs, like, oh God, you know, like this is. Oh, I guess we, you know, look at the, you know, there's very little to do. You can't see outside because you're getting, you know, dust, you know, blown by sand. And with Starlink, go inside, shut the curtains, watch a movie or do whatever, you know. So that's been a huge change in the way that I guess what we can do, because also it enables us as travellers at some point to have a more longevity in this lifestyle, because we can then look at, you know, remote working possibilities too, like whether it be like admin or whatever. So,
which is currently how you guys sort of support the trip a lot going forward, is just little bits of work here and there?
Not really. So at the moment, like we pretty much just go off savings.
Yeah.
You know, like I do a little bit of consultancy here and there, back, you know, for real estate agencies back home, but that, you know, and that, having the Starlink and connectivity enables me long term to look at avenues of having a business or a podcast or whatever it is to bring in some monetary value, so that we can invest back in the tour and, you know, scale it up and bring a certain level of longevity into the project.
Yeah, I suspect if you don't have to fret too much about the finances just yet, I think it'll work itself out.
Yeah, that's right. Hopefully, yeah.
All right, so the Starlink, and just with that as well, I mean, budget is one of those crazy things that just the range is so great for so many different people. Yeah. And I imagine you've come across families, couples, singles, people from all walks of life again. If you were to sort of guesstimate a standard range that you'd expect, you know, if someone wanted to go do their big lap, again, it's always a tough question, but a bit of a range of like, how much would you expect to spend on any given week, you know, between? Yeah,
well, it depends. Obviously, you know, we spend a lot more at the moment because we're traveling so frequently to get to the shows. Like last year when we were traveling, we would spend weeks in locations, free camps as an example, because we had no certain amount of time either. You know, we could, if money was tight or whatever, we'd just stay somewhere longer for free, you know, on a river and just, you know, pump water from the river and, you know, buy and get food or whatever. So, you know, it really does change. Like as fuel is so much more expensive now too, as well, which doesn't help. Like you're paying $3 a litre in some remote locations for diesel, which is just crazy. But I think, you know, as if you're in a caravan, you got a kid or two, and you're doing a, you know, bit here and there, you're not going without anything. I think you probably need, you know, 12. I think we probably spend about $1,200 to $1,500 a week. You know, but that's not going without. That's a really nice, you know, like that's a nice, you know, nice level of, you know, lifestyle, I guess. Yeah. That's having a pub feed a week or whatever, and that's having a couple of beers and, you know, traveling and staying at caravan parks and all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you go last year, we probably would have been lucky to spend, you know, $500 a week, you know, because we just asked, we just by the river, no time frame, and just chill out. You know, fuel is obviously your biggest one, and accommodation. So if you can wipe those two out by staying longer in free camps and by not driving as much, obviously, you know, like it helps. So it's a tough one, but I would say the biggest, the two biggest expenses, obviously food, accommodation. So free camps, wiki camps is a great tool app on your iPhone or Android, I'm sure too, that you can find free camp locations to source. But also the other thing is try and, you know, as a meat eater, one of the biggest expenses is obviously meat in your normal you know, food budgeting sort of plan. So we invested in a small freezer, which by like when we went to Exmouth, I got a wholesaler there, or look for bargains and try and buy bulk on your meat, because you can save literally hundreds of dollars. Like we're still eating meat from Exmouth because we got it so good. So we just bought, you know, $500 worth of meat. But in the grand scheme of things, that's like $2,000 worth of meat here at Woolworths in Perth, you know. So being able to buy and budget and have a little bit of more room in your fridge spaces is I think a key.
if the trip so far was to have a name, and it may be the one on your shirt as well, sort of either a book title, song title, something, I guess, for the theme for you, and whether that's to do with your positivity. Is there another name outside of your current brand, or would that be sort of the title you think of the current trip as you see it for your future book, song?
Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would be because for us, and it takes on a different meaning for every single person who may see the Real Australian Dream, and so it should, because my dream is different to your dream probably. So. For us, this is what we're doing right now is the Real Australian Dream, and it can change. Like, your perception of what the Real Australian Dream is always open to negotiation or open to change. So for us, what we think is this right now is not going to be this, in 3 years' time. So, yeah, it would be. I think it would be. It certainly would be. The Real Australian Dream sums it up pretty well for us.
This might be a bit of a tough one for you. So. The travel so far, the places that you've been and that you've done, there's too many to count probably at this point in time. But if you could only take sort of the top sort of 20% of your trip to redo it again on a very like high surface level, are there things that just jump out at you that you go, I'll
mate,
be back?
Yeah. Well, WA has been like that. It's just. The amazing serenity of these places, and you sit there and you're like, how the hell am I the only one here?
Yeah.
Like, this is the most amazing shit I've ever seen, and like, I am the only one here. Like, it just blows my mind that there are not millions of people camped up, or just like, why is there not a city right here? Like, this is like, WA is just, completely raw in a sense. Like, it's just pristine, but so vast, and you're just like, wow, I got this whole thing to myself. Yeah. So that like, Exmouth and that, that Coral Bay area is, out of peak season. It's just pretty special. But then you go to like Cape York up north of Cairns, and it's a weird vibe too. Not weird, but so like, beautiful canals that cut the water that's made its way through centuries or millenniums through these, they call it channel country, and worked its way through these, these vast areas of land. And then you've got these amazing creeks, but they're crystal clear water and there's no sediment in them. And it's like, wow, they're deep. And it's just like, that's bloody incredible as well. And it's so remote though. So you've got to have like a serious like setup to even get to them at the same time. Is pretty cool. And then, you go up to the Dampier Peninsula, which is north of Broome in WA, and it's like, how does it work that you have the most fluorescent, like these diamonds here on your carpet, like fluorescent turquoise blue? Imagine the brightest light baby blue you can think of against the darkest, reddest mountains. And he's like, how does that even happen? Like your eyeballs are just like, that doesn't work, but it does. Because you'd never seen anything like that before. Like, it's just like, mate, red like that bottle cap there, and then the red sand leaves like a little like sort of stain in the turquoise blue water, and it's just like, man, that's just like crazy.
I forget when it was the change. I mean, obviously it would have been slow over time, but the difference between me as a kid looking during a drive down south, and looking at it being like, this is the most boring thing in the world, to now I couldn't be more happy to go for a long drive and just like enjoy the view of the countryside. Mate,
I love driving. Like, I used to hate, like, you think of, oh man, I've got to drive to Macca's or whatever, I've got to drive to my mum's house or whatever. It's like 10 minutes and you're like, it's just, I probably won't go because I can't be buggered. Now it's like, oh, it's only 400 k's away. It's like, that's perfect. Yeah, we'll go there today. It's like we drive 400 kilometers to just check it out. It's nuts. But Australia's so amazing, man. Like, this is, no matter what, if you're coming to Australia, you won't be disappointed. Like, we as an Australian, I will struggle ever to leave this country and explore it, like explore anywhere else, because, mate, like I struggle to imagine, with my limited experience of offshore and abroad, that there is anywhere else in the world that offers such a diverse, like, settings. Like, you've got rainforests, you've got deserts, you've got, beaches and reefs and, oh, mate, like, it's just like, where, like, it's just so hectic in terms of Tasmania, then you've got like all this like luscious fairyland down there, you know, and then you've got, you know, the Nullarbor Plains and the Great Ocean Road where it's just like angry oceans meet huge cliffs, and then you go to, you know, Danby Peninsula and you got red versus turquoise and Margaret River, and it's just like, man, like there's just, you can never ever get bored, because by the time you've done the whole thing, you're ready to do it again.
I think Tourism Australia, you should probably reach out to Hayden.
That's right.
Content, right?
Oh, mate, there's just this, like, you know, like you could, and you could never ever, and that's why I think, you know, what you're doing there with enabling, you know, offshore people to extend and find ways to explore this country, because 12 months is not enough. 12 months is nowhere near enough to really, like, you know, to immerse yourself in these spots. You're just phenomenal.
Well, 2 years down the track, I think you've got the authority to say that.
Yeah.
Final two questions before you shoot off.
Yep.
One is, now you're getting into the social side.
Yep.
A lot of travellers, couples in particular, sort of using and leveraging social media platforms to sort of showcase what they're doing and sort of create the lifestyle that they're after, which I think is fantastic.
Yep.
And I think one of the real benefits of your phone, social media and such, which people forget about, the idea of the influencer is a little bit of a trigger word for people now, and it's sort of like the tall poppy syndrome, I suspect, where it's should someone be paid so much for things that are just like posting a photo, which I don't think it's the right way to think about it. I think it's the fact that people can do that, and you put the work in to do it, you can now really foster a working holiday that you're proud of and happy to do. So for you, how much time are you setting aside currently for your socials on the road? Yeah,
well, I think for two parts of that, obviously, it's what you said there. Like, anyone who's going to begrudge anyone for making a lifestyle to do this is, you know, like, get a grip, because like these are people, like I said, I put a rant up the other day, because it's one thing that I guess really frustrates me about it is that, you know, like, in all honesty, we don't make anything from socials. Like, we just do it for fun. Like, anything we do make, we donate to Make-A-Wish anyway. But there are, you know, you look at, like, you know, some of the big families out there, you know, or travelers who are making good money. It's like, man, that's freaking unreal. Yeah. Like, you're able to sustain a lifestyle where you can spend time with your kids or your partner, or travel around in your, you know, in your combi or whatever. It's like, man, good on you. Like, I wish I was you, you know, like, that's how I would have been 12 months. I was like, I wish I could do that, you know? So, you know, like, the only people that are probably, you know, complaining are the people who wish they were there anyway. So, like, whatever, you know, like, you know, social stuff, you know, we do it for the enjoyment. We do it, you know, for, you know, it depends. Like, it's a moving target, you know, like, now I guess I'm feeling more passionate about it, with being lined in. Like, last year when I was just posting photos or whatever of cool things, it was like, oh, well, I didn't put much time into it because it was just, you know, just a travel diary essentially. Yeah. But now, obviously, having it linked in with our goal of, you know, the Make-A-Wish and the traveling, and the, you know, and providing these funds for kids, I put a lot more time and energy into it. It's probably not a wise use of time. I should be probably doing other stuff, you know, maybe making a living or whatever. But for me, I'm so passionate about it, and you know, it doesn't take much. You know, literally iPhone, GoPro, whatever it is, and you know, people. The biggest tip I've got for people is, you know, add value to and the dollars will come. That's what I've always lived by. You know, if you've got 1,000 followers and you're out there, you know, hitting up brands trying to, you know, get endorsements, the reality is they're going to be like, oh man, whatever. You know, where you add value to your community, add value to your people, add value to, you know, where you've been, or the fact that there's, you know, fuel that's cheaper here, or the fact there's a little free camp with a 24-hour, you know, stopover, or free water, or whatever it is. Add value to your community. That's as simple as going on a story and saying, hey guys, you know, like the other day I did one on a bloody I can't even remember what it was. Oh, okay, a little device or whatever. And there was no brand or anything associated with it. It's like, yeah, you should get one of these. I don't care what brand you get, but you know, like, this is something that helps me out. You know, same with Starlink. You know, like that was on. I bought it at $1,000 or whatever it cost me, and 3 days later it's at $450. I'm like, oh, hey guys, I just got ripped off, but I really love it. So it's now $450. So go ahead and get it. You know,
Elon hit up Hayden.
That's right.
Make-A-Wish Foundation. Like, Starlink donation.
He hasn't returned any of my calls since he bought Twitter. He's too good for me now. No, but I just, for nothing else. So for me, it serves as a same reason why we do our YouTube. For me, it serves as a, you know, wherever life leads us down the track, it's a little place where you look back and like, yeah, cool. That's you know. Otherwise, you go into your phone and you never look back in your photos in your phone because you've got 10,000 of them, and you know you're always looking for them. Whereas it serves as a little memory.
I like the diary, and I would definitely recommend that you continue just follow the passion, give the value, and whatever happens. But I have no doubt dollars come, and it's much better to not look for the dollars.
That's right.
But just look what. And
you also find yourself. You don't want to find yourself in a position where where that's where you've hedged your bets to make an income off it, and then you're all of a sudden having to sacrifice, your maybe ethics or morals to promote something that you don't actually like or believe in, because that's how you got to put fuel in the car the next day, And
you're singing Wiggles in the pub again.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. So you don't want to be saying, "Oh, how good is this XYZ device?" And really, this is the biggest heap of shit you've ever used, But you know that there's $300 for your personal story on it. So if you don't, anything that comes, hey, that's great. But I wouldn't necessarily probably hedge your bets on it.
Cool. And the final little piece. So as myself, as I said sort of before off here, was next year or sometime in the future, a big lap is actually something that considering as well, and want to see if we can make that happen. So as someone at ground zero, never done it before, there is an infinite number of things and bits of advice that could be given to someone like me. Is there anything in your mind that may relate to sort of the best failure you can recall for yourself that, again, may have led to, an extreme amount of learning about how to maximize your trip or whatever it may have been? Was there something there that you're like, that happened for me, and what a great learn that has been, and recommendation for
not so much an individual failure, but the fact that we were lucky in the sense that we were pushed to travel only due to fear of, obviously our relationship ending. But one of the biggest things I see, and one of the biggest, reasons, is there's never a good time. There's never a good time to quit your job and live like skimped as on a traveling. There's never a good time to be broke. Like, that's the reality of when you hit the road. Like you got to understand that you are sacrificing a lot of the time, your job or your money or whatever, to have memories and experience. A lot of people, I feel like they wait for the perfect time, the perfect rig, the perfect caravan, the perfect setup. We were happy in our, $1,000 camper trailer, and now we've got, a big caravan and, all that sort of stuff. And we were just as happy then as we are now. And it's particularly probably one of the downsides of social media is that you see these rigs, you see rigs like mine or rigs like whoever's, you're like, oh, I've got a spot, I've got to wait till I get that to get going. It's like, stuff all that, man. Make that up as, like get on the road first and just enjoy it, and don't wait for the perfect time, because the perfect time is never going to happen to travel. Like it's, like and that's just the way society's geared towards. It's never going to be ideal. And my other thing is, travel now, because it's not getting any easier to travel, and more things are getting harder to do. Like more and more things are getting shut down. More and more things are, becoming more expensive. If you look at experiences 3 years ago in terms of what they cost now, you're paying an extra $300 or $400. So you've really got, I think, you've got a limited time frame to experience this country in its, in its best, as like our parents did and our parents beforehand. You went to all ends of the earth and got to see it in its rawest, but through maybe it might be climate change, maybe it be, political motivations, or whether it be, whatever it is, there are things that are becoming harder to do and experience. And in 4 or 5 years, 2 years, 3 years, even since we've been on the road for 2 years, things that we've done are no longer able to be done, for whatever reason.
Well, I, for one, am definitely inspired, I think, to take up the mantle and try and see the raw parts of the country before who knows what sort of happens. Right. And just want to say big thanks to you for coming on the show, and also for Amber and Freya letting you come over here as well for the
I'm off to the zoo now, mate.
Okay. But I hope the Real Australian Dream continues on until next year, and I'll be certainly following along to see what happens. And to everyone that's listening to this, hopefully in time, try and make one of the next 12 shows. I'll certainly be trying to make my way down that way to Esperance as well. But yeah, man, I think what you're doing is awesome. I think it's very clear to anyone paying attention that the way that you guys are going about it and the fact that it is just from a very genuine place, which you can't make up, and the fact that it's just kind of off the cuff. The guitar playing might be a little bit rough at times, and you're not getting your makeup on in time or anything like that. But I think what you're doing is awesome, and I'm so glad to see you doing what you're doing now, and that you're spreading some good vibes around. So it's awesome, dude.
Thanks,
really
mate. Yeah, and I think in closing, for anyone listening, is that like as I said, the message that I'm trying to spread is that life is amazing, and there's always so much dark light that gets portrayed, whether you watch the news or social media. There's always that dark cloud that hangs over everyone, just for the fact that that's what sells newspapers. But there is so much light, positivity, love, energy, good things happening in the world. You just got to open yourself up to the people that that help you get there. And I think that's the best thing about traveling, is that you meet, as I said, relationships are accelerated, and there's more good people in your small circle. And regardless of whether you're traveling in a 1976 Toyota Hiace or whether you're in a brand new bloody caravan, get out there and have a crack, and just live and worry about everything later.
Thanks for leading on that. That was epic.
Cheers, mate. Thanks, brother. Okay.